When are we going to unite? In the African Union, there are very few things that have not been discussed and agreed upon. The problem is implementation at member state level. Because as citizens and as young people, we don't interest ourselves in what has been agreed and make sure that we push that those things should be implemented. But also young people, you must refuse to take arms and kill your own people. Because it's not the elderly walking with walking sticks who carry guns. It's young people. It's young people who kill. It's young people who rape women. So you must go out and preach that that should not happen. The world continues to thrive through African resources, but Africans are poor. That's the African dichotomy of a rich Africa, but poor Africans. And that must change. And the youth must be at the forefront of changing that. And we can't blame the West or the colonizers for it. It's us who are sending those minerals. They are no longer taking them by force. We are taking them there.
When will we unite? When will Africa unite? If you want to know the reason behind failure of unity of this continent, watch this video from the beginning till the end.
We are Africans. Because I hear people saying, oh, she's a South African. No, I'm not. I'm an African who lives and was born in South Africa. So all of us must first think of ourselves as Africans. And then where we were born and where we live is secondary. And I say this because if we are to build the Africa we want, we can't build it if we don't think of ourselves as Africans. So, but I like to quote Kwame Nkrumah because he said a lot about the unity of the continent. I'm going to quote a very long quote from him today. And I quote, Africa is one continent, one people, and one nation. The notion that in order to have a nation, it is necessary for there to be a common language, common territory, and common culture has failed to stand the test of time or the scrutiny of scientific definition of an objective reality. The community of economic life is the major feature within a nation, and it is the economy which holds together the people living in a territory. It is on this basis that the new Africans recognize themselves as potentially one nation, whose dominion is the center, the entire African continent, I close quote. So we must stop thinking of ourselves as nation states first, but we must see ourselves as African first. And it makes sense in every respect. It makes economic sense. You know, when you are a business person and you think of yourself as a South African, then your market is 60 million plus people. But if you think of yourself as an African, your market is 1.4 plus billion people. So I think we should just be Africans. And to close that part, I'll quote Kwame again, and I quote, "Divided we are weak. United, Africa could become one of the greatest forces for good in the world," close quote. So when are we going to be that greatest force for good in the world? when we are united. When are we going to unite? When are we going to unite? I want to say to the youth, you must follow what the leaders agree on at the AU, and then make sure that it's implemented. For instance, they agreed on a protocol on free movement of people, but it hasn't been rectified by enough countries for it to come into force. So how many of you have said to your government, rectify this because we want free movement? If the youth doesn't push it, it won't happen. So it only needs 15 countries to rectify before it comes into force. But we haven't had those 15 countries. So I challenge you, when you go back to your countries, check if your country is rectified. If it hasn't, push them to rectify. And then in 2016, an African Union passport was launched. And it is supposed to be issued by member states to their citizens so that citizens can then move freely across the continent. But countries are not doing that and citizens are quiet. So don't blame anyone. Blame yourselves. And we say the Africa we want to build is an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa. So how is it going to be integrated if we adore the borders that were drawn by foreigners in Berlin, but we cherish them and we defend them with dear life? I want to just say we must hail countries and regions that are trying to remove those borders. Here in Southern Africa, we have Zambia, Namibia, and Botswana. We've removed the borders. Amongst those three countries, you go with your ID card to any of the three countries. And in East Africa, I think it's Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. It's the same. In ECOWAS, if you've got an ECOWAS passport, you can move around. So, but in Seychelles and in Ghana, you don't need to have a visa, you just arrive. And that's how it should be. If you are an African in an African country, and Rwanda as well, any African who has an African passport doesn't have to apply for a visa, you just arrive in Rwanda. And that's how it should be really. But if the youth doesn't mobilize for it, it won't happen. But you quoted Aspiration 6. The important thing is that we must invest in young people. We must invest in the people. The people are our most precious resource. More precious than all the things we talk about. The people are the most precious, and therefore we must invest in them. And investing in young people, Agenda 2063 says there must be a skills revolution. Why a skills revolution? Because there is lots of unemployment to start with. And a lot of the unemployed are unemployable because a lot of them don't have the skills. So it's important to ensure that every young person has a skill, especially in the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, maths, digital literacy, so that they can be creative and innovate, because Young people are innovative given a chance. So we need the skills revolution. But the wealth in Africa, whether it's natural or minerals, cannot be turned into wealth if we don't have people to turn it into wealth. It will just remain stone and dust. So that's why the skills are important, because we must move from selling raw materials to industrializing. Africa must industrialize. And if we don't industrialize, we'll never build the Africa we want. We must invest in technology, innovation, and equip young people with modern skills, not only to get jobs, but to create jobs, to be entrepreneurs, and they create jobs. But also, young people must not wait to be invited. Why do you wait to be invited? Nobody gets invited to a revolution. You must lead the revolution. You don't have to be invited. You must drive the development today and design the future. So, we must create competitive, resilient workforce to respond to the needs of the African economy that remains largely dependent and depressed in favor of the West and former colonizers. Africa cannot continue exporting raw materials and importing finished goods, because it means we sell cheap and we buy expensive. It means we export jobs, because when you send something raw, jobs are created where you are sending raw material. So we're the biggest importers of jobs and biggest importers of revenue, because by the time that what you sold raw comes back to you, it's probably 10 times or even more expensive. So I think youth should say it's enough and get the skills to beneficiate our minerals, to process our natural resources. Because the way our economies are today, it's still the colonial model that will keep us trapped and dependent. The world continues to thrive through African resources, but Africans are poor. That's the African dichotomy of a rich Africa, but poor Africans. And that must change. And the youth must be at the forefront of changing that. And we can't blame the West or the colonizers for it. It's us who are sending those minerals. They are no longer taking them by force. We are taking them there. And we must also make sure that our governments are not corrupt, they don't mismanage, and we should stop the illicit financial flows that bleed the continent. So we must also industrialize so that we can trade amongst ourselves. The Africa Continental Free Trade has been ratified by 49 countries. And what I like about it is that they've also developed the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which was officially launched in January 2022. But unfortunately, only 17 countries are using it. And more need to join, because it is a centralized financial market infrastructure that will enable efficient flow of money securely across African borders. It ensures that when Africans trade with one another, our money stays in Africa, our value stays in Africa, our growth benefits, and we trade in our local currencies. Why do we want to continue trading in foreign currencies that we don't have? So, if your countries are not part of the 17, urge them to be part of the 17, to use the Pan-African payment and settlement system. Because Africa benefits if you use that, and it will boost intra-Africa trade, foster financial integration, and reduce dependency on external currencies. And for business, it increases opportunities and improve working capital and access to growing network of financial instruments. The economic integration, it fosters a unified African market and promotes economic growth. So I think we should really all work towards that. But Africa also has something unique that it has developed, the protocol on women and youth. The trade protocol on women and youth doesn't exist anywhere in the world. It's only here in Africa. And we must, as youth and women, we must take advantage of it, because it empowers and protects the participation of women and young people in all spheres. So that protocol is very important. Now, when it comes to governance, I think a lot have been said about governance. But good governance is central to the prosperity that we talk about. Without good governance, there will be no prosperity. But I must emphasize that good governance is not only about how that government was formed. We have democratically elected governments. Some do well, but a lot don't. They don't even respond. They don't listen to their citizens. They don't grow the economies. They don't fight inequalities. But they boast that they were elected democratically. So for me, at the end of the day, it's how the government responds to the needs of its citizens. A lot of people talk about the Sahel. I'm not endorsing undemocratic practices, but I must say that I've been to the Sahel, but only to one country, which invited me. I've been to Burkina. And if the people of Burkina and other countries are happy with their governments, who are we to say you are not happy? The test will be, are they building schools for kids? Hospitals and clinics for people who need health services? Are they building their infrastructure, or are they? And what is good about them, I must say, is that they've decolonized the Sahel in the true sense of the word. So we must decolonize. I think the Prime Minister also reminded us that we must decolonize our minds. And as a member of SASO, our first president, Steve Biko, said the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. If the mind of the oppressed is not decolonized, you don't need them to be here physically. You are already in prison. So let's decolonize our minds. And I want to now talk about the rights that youth are demanding. And I think it's correct for the youth to demand their rights. You have every right to demand all those rights. But let me tell you a story. When I was in Addis, we had a youth meeting. And they met, and then they gave me the outcome of their meeting. When I looked at it, it had one R, rights. I said, no, there are two R's. There's rights and there's responsibilities. Go back. I want rights and responsibilities. Because you have a right to education, but you have a responsibility to pass your exams. We have a right to health, but you have a responsibility to look after yourselves and not smoke your lungs to death and drink your liver to death. You have a right to participate in politics, but you have a responsibility to be ethical and not be bribed or bribe. You have a right to be in government and be a public servant or in parliament. But you must understand that to be a good public servant, you have to be humble, you have to be compassionate, and you have to be responsive. And you have to answer all calls. You hear somebody saying, I once called somebody, I won't say who. I called many times, no response, never returned my call. And when I met him, I said, I've been calling you. You are not returning my calls. You are not answering my calls. Oh, Ma, I don't have your number. So I said, are you a leader of people in your phone? Are you a public servant of people in your phone? You are not. You must, if you are a public servant, you are a leader, you must answer all calls. That's your responsibility. And if you work, you must work honestly and come to work on time. And only leave when you have finished the work that you are supposed to do, not because it's Shaile time. When you have finished what you are supposed to do. And when you go to bed, I always say to my team, when you go to bed, before you fall asleep, ask yourself, did I do my best today? That little voice inside will tell you. It will tell you whether you did your best or you didn't. If it says you didn't, then make sure that you say, tomorrow, I'll do my best. Because nobody expects more than your best. But you are the only one who knows your best. And if it says, yes, I did my best, say, tomorrow I'll try and do even more. You know? And also, if you are a leader, surround yourself with good people. Sometimes those who are even better than you. Because you are as good as your team. Don't think you must surround yourself with yes men and yes women. Because then you won't perform what you are supposed to perform. They'll keep saying yes, even if you are saying the wrong things. Why are they there? So surround yourself with good people. You're as good as your team. I just want to say to the young women in particular, believe in yourselves. Don't allow anyone to tell you you are inferior. Inferior to who? Believe in yourselves and do your best. And know you can lead in any area of human endeavor if you put your mind to it. So don't allow anyone to tell you you can't do this, you can't do this. No. Just believe in yourself and say, I want to do this and do it. You can lead anywhere. In the economy, in the professions, in politics, everywhere. But let me say, if young people want to succeed in everything, they must also be organized. If you are not organized, you are not likely to succeed. And let me talk about gender-based violence, because I haven't heard anyone talk about it. As young men here, all of you should be campaigning, and old men who are here, you should all be campaigning against gender-based violence. You mustn't tolerate it wherever it happens. And let me say that the African Union has now got a convention against gender-based violence and girls. Have your countries rectified that convention? If your countries, including mine, haven't rectified, let's push them to rectify it. You see, in the African Union, there are very few things that have not been discussed and agreed upon. The problem is implementation at member state level. Because as citizens and as young people, we don't interest ourselves in what has been agreed and make sure that we push that those things should be implemented. I won't say a lot, but I want to say that we must not look the other way when there are conflicts in countries. We must interest ourselves to make sure that Africa finds solutions to those. And we must not wait to be validated by the West. We must find solutions in Africa for African problems. It's really a pity what's happening in the DRC, in some parts of the Sahel, in Sudan, and some attention needs to be paid to that. Because peace and security remain the bedrock upon which justice and development must rest. If there is no peace, there is war. How can you have development? There can be no development if there is war. But let me say something else that we don't usually say. You cannot sustain peace if there is no development either. To sustain peace, there must be development. Because if there is no development, then people will rise and you won't be able to sustain peace and stability. So, but also young people, you must refuse to take arms and kill your own people. Because it's not the elderly walking with walking sticks who carry guns. It's young people. It's young people who kill. It's young people who rape women. So you must go out and preach that that should not happen. We should not allow that. And also, I must say that maybe it's provocative, but I think we must say to our governments, the budgeting must reflect the population. The budget, we must have both youth-responsive budgeting and gender-based budgeting. Gender-responsive budgeting. Because those are the majority in the population. So the budget must express. We must see through the budget that we are a young continent. We can't be a young continent and not have a budget that expresses that. But also, maybe just the last thing I want to say, which I always feel strongly about. 60% of available arable land globally is on this continent. But this continent spends billions importing food. Why? Why? As I said the other day, Sankara said, who feeds you controls you. We must feed ourselves. We have the land, we have the people, we have the sunshine, we have water. What is it we don't have? Is it just a decolonized mind that we don't have? So I think young people, we must eat and consume what we produce. And produce what we consume. And there is a lot of money in agriculture. And food security is important because it will forever be there. There is no scientist who has found any other fuel for human beings except food. So wherever you go, human beings need food. And we are not very efficient. We need 3 meals a day with that fuel. So there's a market for that. So let's not import food. Let's grow and feed ourselves and maybe export some. So in conclusion, let's not see the Africa we want as a distant dream. It is a choice. It is a choice whether we choose to build it today, whether we choose to unite or choose to divide, whether we choose to industrialize and trade, or whether we choose to continue sending raw materials, whether we choose to lead or want to be led. So for me, this generation must make its choice. And our young people, young men and young women, the youth of the continent, must make sure we build the Africa we want today. And let's rise together with accountability, unity, and action to build the Africa we want as envisaged in Agenda 2063. Thank you.
Thank you, Africa.